or employee segment is our sweet spot. And we wanted to surround them with an immersive omni-channel experience to help drive them down the funnel. So basically, the strategy is to find solid gold prospects, get our brand in front of them, and bring them down the funnel in a very structured and methodical way. So, what does this look like? In terms of big data, we partnered with Experian to mine their data sources, and we discovered our total addressable market had 8.4 million small businesses with 1 to 4 employees in their database. And so that was a huge eye opener to how big we just could go with this strategy. Um, and so once we found those customers, we can search on and splice and dice based on any one of 500 different attributes to find the perfect combination of small business, in business for multiple years, healthy financials, and low risk of bankruptcy. And so that once we found our core market, we brought them through our ABM platform. We used Demandbase. And for this strategy, we had to set up several different new pieces of tech. So Demandbase was one of them. We also, at the top of the funnel, began them in an automated send of direct mail. So we use Sendoso to send them a series of postcards. And I'll go through that sort of content funnel later on in the deck. And the whole point of these two top funnel channels is to bring people to our website where we give them both a personalized experience, but to also drop a cookie in their browser and to retarget them. And retargeting them, we looked at some of our gated assets as well as webinars and gated video. This strategy did initially include a live event for the retargeting. However, COVID happened, so we had to switchly pivot over to a webinar or virtual event. And once somebody converted off of some of these upper funnel conversion points, we dropped them in a nurture, and the call to action was sign up for a quote. And so there's a couple of things that I really like about this strategy. One, it is scalable. So you can target 100 companies, 10 companies, 10,000 companies, whatever's going to work for your company, you can really scale it nicely. It's also repeatable. So if you have a couple of different ideal customer profiles for your company, you can take this strategy and use it in an automotive vertical or an agricultural vertical or a CPG vertical, and just sort of tweak some of the messaging and creatives. The other thing about this that I really like is we don't have a BDR team at SurePayroll, but if you have a BDR team, that's another really good top funnel tactic for this. So you know that you're touching your people both online, offline, and through a live person if you've got a BDR team. And so this is the tech stack portion. I'm going to hand this over to Ashley.
Thanks, Carey. Yeah, so when the team decided to launch this strategy, really already had a pretty solid integrated marketing tech stack. So at this point, the team could target individual groups by demos, psychographic, firmographics, all through Google Display, YouTube advertising, Facebook, LinkedIn, kind of all the upper funnel sources. And they were using gated content to convert these into prospects and then use Marketo to turn them into leads. But although each audience was unique, it was unique within each individual platform. And there wasn't really one message, there wasn't one seamless experience wherever they went. So in order to do this, we did need to bring in additional tech like Experian for mining data, Demandbase as the ABM engine, and Sendoso as the automated print sending platform is what we used it for this strategy. So starting with Experian, which Carey mentioned, they did have a database of 8.4 million small businesses. We then used additional filters. As Carey mentioned, there's so many you could choose from. The goal here is really to target down to get the most qualified and the most profitable leads for our very specific business. So filtered by geos that convert the best for us, number of employees, number of years in business, low risk, no bankruptcy, all sorts of things like that. There's just so much you could do with an Experian. So that was really nice to have. And just to be able to tone into kind of your target audience. Plus, at this point, we're able to append name and addresses for our print sends, also email addresses for Marketo, and then domains as well for Demandbase, which we wouldn't have had in our list otherwise. So this really didn't take much time to set up at all. As soon as you give Experian just kind of a few days to get your account live within 20 minutes or so, or however long the filtering process takes. So it's up to you. Could be pretty quick. And then from there, you can just export your file immediately. So that was really easy. One of the other nice things about Experian outside of just what we used it for is we're also able to use it in other areas of the business too. So as Carey mentioned, you can get things like SIC codes, NAICS codes to learn about different industries, get years of business. We tied some of this back to our customer data, which we didn't already have information on this. And also for some of our win back campaigns that we did as well for terminated clients in a world of the pandemic that we're going through, a lot of small businesses had to close their doors. So it was really nice to be able to use Experian to sort of validate, are they still in business or not? So we're not reaching out to people that aren't really qualified any longer. So that was Experian. The next piece that we stood up was Demandbase. And so this, to start with, you're pretty much setting up audience profiles. You can upload a similar list of customers, including their domains. You could set up relevant keywords. You could do a lot of things so that even if you don't have a list like we did to already import, you're still able to build a qualified audience there. We were able to integrate it into our Google Analytics instance and Salesforce instances so that we're feeding data back into Demandbase, which was sort of a one-way feed both ways into Demandbase from those two platforms. And our team really we don't track domains when leads come in. Again, as Carey mentioned, these are smaller businesses, so it's just not something that we're asking on our lead forms or we're asking. So if you are somebody who is tracking domains, this is great too, because then you could almost set up a two-way sync with Demandbase and Salesforce. So not only are you feeding Demandbase opportunity information, Demandbase is feeding you back sales information, where they're going on your site, what they're engaging with, if they touch this many pages or more, and then your sales team is able to proactively reach out to them. So all of that, just for us to set up, it did take a couple weeks. With our team, what we ended up doing is uploading a list of about 10,000 people from Experian. We were able to match about 6.5 thousand. For ABM, this is kind of a large list, but considering that we're hyper focused, we're on micro businesses in that kind of 1 to 10 space, that we had to go with kind of a larger file. If you are working with, larger enterprise opportunities with thousands of employees, you'd probably want to start with a smaller list. And then the last piece of tech was Sendoso. And so this was really easy to integrate. There were pretty much 3 steps. So starting by setting up a new service, and then from there, you just input the endpoint URL back into Sendoso. You're setting up one custom field, which is pretty much the Sendoso Touch ID. And then you're setting up a webhook. So really simple. What this lets you do is go back into Sendoso, and then within the Sendoso platform, you can create touches. So these can be print sends, which is what we did. This could be e-gifts. This could be perishable goods. This could be branded collateral. They have pretty much anything that you could want. So that part is not a challenge at all. Honestly, you could probably set this up in about 1 day. With Sendoso, you can also, if you don't want to set up your own flow within Marketo to automate the send of something, you can also just upload a CSV file into Sendoso and send out gift cards that way. Or you could always copy the Sendoso URL for your individual touch and then input that into Marketo in any email. And so that way you're able to, you could either automate sends or directly send these sort of e-gifts.
Awesome. I'm going to walk you guys through the automated send flow in terms of the content that we provided. So earlier in 2020, prior to COVID, we had partnered with a local PR agency to conduct some primary research. We took that research and created some data-driven studies, and we released these studies on our website in the form of gated content. We also had PR activities around them. So we took our first piece of gated content. It was a 2020 Small Business Worry Index, things that small businesses were worried about. And we followed the 411 content rule of 4 pieces of brand agnostic content followed by one soft ask, followed by one hard ask. And so the content flow followed a 1 week cadence with 6 postcards. And so this was a 6-week send. So the first 3 sends, we pulled out just really interesting little stats from this worry report, and we put them on the postcard. We talked about the report on the back of the postcard. And our first soft ask was to directly download the 2020 worry report. We followed up that soft ask with another piece of content around a customer testimonial. We have a really great small business customer down in Naperville who's got a coffee shop, and he employs ex-felons to help turn their lives around. It's a really great story. And so we featured him on that postcard. And the last piece of content in this send was our hard ask of come and get a quote to actually generate some lead activity related to this content in the send. And the programmatic display flow, so I talked about this a little bit at the beginning. The first series of ads that we put in front of these customers were just generic SurePayroll ads. Here's the company, here's what we do. And again, the whole idea is just to get them to click to come to our website so we can retarget them. So I want to go a little bit more into the retargeting. We did retarget with some of that gated content, some of those data studies that I just mentioned. Once they converted on the gated content, we had an automated send to send them both the PDF of that content, but also a physical version of that content. We also retargeted with ads for our webinar. And once they converted on the ad for the webinar, they were entered into automated email series with reminders and follow-ups and things like that. Once these audiences converted off of either the gated content or the webinar, they were once retargeted again, but this time the messaging was different. It was much more pointed to generate leads and quotes from this activity. So this is just example data. So this is not the real stuff. This is just an example of how I built my business case. We were targeting a large audience of small businesses with this strategy. Ashley just mentioned we were only able to get in front of about 6,500. So the idea was we needed to generate a couple of hundred new customers or new units, which is what we call them. And then we'll talk about what happened. Dun, dun, dun. So we talked about how we get in front of these people, how we're getting in front of them online, offline, through different various mediums, through different various content messages. And while the final numbers look okay, I'll tell you what went wrong. So we had a final test pool of 6,493 small businesses that were really in our sweet spot. We were able to generate a 34% response rate at the top of the funnel. So that means we were able to bring in 2,200 new small businesses to our website. So that's great, in my opinion. That is fantastic. Any click-through rate on a display ad, if you can get it at 30%, if you can get it at 1%, that's good. 34% is stunning. However, when you look down to the bottom of the funnel and the number of clients we could actually attribute to this strategy, the number was 8. So we had an error in our attribution, and I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to talk about this a little bit more.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, our team really still don't track domains within Salesforce. This is not something that we're asking for on lead forms when they're coming in. However, this is the unique identifier for Demandbase, and that is how Demandbase is able to track back opportunities from our Salesforce instance into theirs. So the idea was to use assisted conversions as a secondary measure from Google Analytics. However, the way that we had the UTM parameters set up and the data set up, we were only passing data back into Demandbase from Google Analytics. We weren't passing it into Google Analytics. So you couldn't see any visitor data, you couldn't see conversion data from Demandbase as a source, meaning we also could not see any of the assisted conversions that we were hoping to see as well. So as you can see here, and as Carey's mentioning, we have a solid amount and quantity of website visitors, but we're leaking attribution as we're getting further down the funnel. So the team decided, let's pull it together. Let's try for a phase 2. Let's see if we can, one, optimize our links within Demandbase to also include campaign and source parameters. And then additionally, let's import the entire list with domains this time into Marketo, so that as soon as a lead gets created from Salesforce, the domain data could then sync and tie back. And that way we're ensuring that we are not only pulling anybody in with UTM parameters, but also backing it up with domain information as they're coming in. So this is, I believe, still live for phase 2. I think the team is going to be testing for another month or so, and then should be able to get some final results.
Right. So I had to do a first report out to my leadership team of this growth strategy that I projected would generate hundreds of new customers, and go in with my head between my legs and say, okay, so I definitely can tell you we generated 8 new customers. However, and you'll see there in the hypothesis portion that because of the significant response rate we got at the top of the funnel, I mean, 34% is great. If I can get 2,000 new businesses to my website, I'll do that all day long. Like that's good in my book. However, we had poor attribution, so we really couldn't tell exactly. But building in that stronger attribution that Ashley just talked about, got funding and justification for the 3 new pieces of tech that we stood up to rerun this strategy with a different segment of ours. These are a little bit of a bigger segment, our reseller market. So we could have a little bit of a higher match rate. And then take a look at the success we see there. So yeah, we have a little bit to go before we can do a report out. But this is one of those lessons learned, like you think it can be the most beautiful strategy and you think you've got everything unlocked. You just got to check and check and check and double check. And had we maybe done a report out, say in the first 30 days, maybe we would have caught this sooner than running the full 90-day strategy and then catching it at the end when I have to go back to leadership to fund a second round and say, well, we got 8 we know of for sure, I think would also be another lesson learned. So that is the conclusion of our journey at SurePayroll with automating ABM and our attribution. I will open it up for questions.
So feel free to take yourself off of mute if you have a question, or if it's easier to type it into chat, feel free to do that as well. Any and all questions here are open and welcome.
Yeah, so Carey, I have a question around the different focus in terms of audience for the second set. Did you also do a recalculation of what your goal targets are, and how does that look compared to what you did for your initial calculations? You know, when you mentioned that your target audience on this one is a little bit different.
Right. The target audience for the second group is larger, like accountant CPA resellers. We don't have a lot of great data on this segment. It's one that has been pretty underserved by marketing for most of my duration here. We're just starting to do some marketing around it now. So unlike our direct, where we've got tons of data, we know, the click-through rates, we know the CPA, CPL, we know conversion rates. We don't really have that for this audience. So we're hoping that this strategy will help us build some of that groundwork.
The other nice opportunity that, came out of being able to do this and being able to see who these companies are and who's engaging within Demandbase themselves, is just seeing the different audience segments from Demandbase that are engaging. It was interesting. It seemed to be more like franchises or insurance agencies or a lot of clergy. So it was an interesting group to find and identify. So it's like, maybe if we do another round, we're really not just focusing on any small businesses, we're sort of focusing on these very specific verticals.
Hi, so actually building on that, it sounds like you guys had, pretty clear ideas of who your ideal customers were. Were there any other surprises that came out of the results along with those, that customer market you just identified a second ago?
One thing that was kind of interesting is within Demandbase, you can also see all of the pages and where they're going on your site. So, when we're targeting such a large list, you're able to sort of see those aggregating. And while we're only pointing them to so many places, whether it's gated content or, our lead converting pages, it was interesting to see kind of where else they were going. on the blog. And I think even with some of the other industries that we're targeting, we have two products. One is for businesses, one is for like individual households. It's nanny payroll. And so it was interesting to see that while we were targeting some of these companies for business payroll, not only were they interested in that, but also sort of cross product interest, and they were going to some of our other product pages too.
Ashley, what did your overall reporting in Marketo look like for things like that when you had your cross product stuff? Did you have lead nurturing that came in for that, or what did that look like from that piece?
Yeah, definitely. So as Carey mentioned, as some of these leads are coming in, not only are they getting, gated content follow-up email communications, and this is also too, if they converted, I believe that on the lead form we had, are you a small business owner? Because it is a worry index, any type of audience could be interested in what's concerning small businesses as we move through 2020, which again, this report was developed pre-pandemic. But that was really kind of the goal there, was to get these people into our Marketo instance. From there, if they were a small business, we were targeting them with specific small business nurtures related to that, related to some of the information that we were also sending in the postcards. And then from there, if they were not a small business, we put them in a separate list. And for them, once we would do a monthly newsletter, they would get kind of a unique newsletter where it was more so that more informational content, pieces like that, thought leadership, things like that, so that we could segment out the two audiences there. We didn't, as soon as somebody comes in from one of our lead gen sources, from there, again, we are also segmenting out into two different nurture pipelines. But that's kind of how the segmentation flowed there. Anybody who came into these programs as well, since we had the Sendoso integration, we had a whole nurture built out in there for our print sends. So not only were they also getting emails, but they were also getting postcards delivered to their home or business at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Now, I know I saw some feedback from some of our attendees today. I know a lot of you had mentioned that this is something that you're considering doing at your organization or have started implementing. I'd love to hear what kind of challenges you're running into, what questions you have, or what tech you are implementing to help support your strategies.
Brooke, I can talk a little bit about that if you want. So we are looking into using intent data, but as you know, it's a challenge to get started. We are trying to figure out the best place to use it, as well as where the handoff between marketing and sales is, and when you just keep it in marketing's camp and when you hand it over to sales. So that is the struggle we're having right now, is getting that baseline drawn and then bringing in intent data to see whether or not it moves the needle. But that's definitely something we're struggling with, is understanding who should own what when. Like, do you do the cross-pollination between marketing and sales, or do you keep it in one place versus another? So that is our challenge right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and this is what's nice about Sendoso too. So first, if you are kind of struggling with that, I think there could be a combination at some point. I think there could be cross-pollination. There needs to be a certain point where you're telling, especially having Demandbase connected, you can see these people on the website before they're even a lead. So if you have teams reaching out to almost like colder leads or trying to do some outbound outreach there, that's a really good area for them to be able to see. And maybe you're creating tasks or notifications that are pushing from Demandbase into Salesforce to alert them that this is happening. The other thing with Sendoso is that it can be part of your Salesforce instance. So not only is it just marketing is automating things, if you have a business development team or if you have teams that are working on larger sales opportunities, within Salesforce, you can automate certain sends. So let's say you had a really good conversation with someone, or you just closed a large deal, or you see someone's just sort of starting to re-engage after a few, weeks, months, whatever it is. You can hit a button, the sales rep, and they can have, pre-assigned budgets, for example, and then they can send off some sort of branded swag, or maybe it's a handwritten card or something like that. Maybe it's an e-gift card, and maybe it's just, hey, here's a $5 coffee card. Let's grab coffee sometime and talk about, XYZ, whatever it is. So the nice thing about some of these tools in this strategy is it allowed you the ability to maybe see things you couldn't have seen and just offer them something that maybe you can't just without that.
It's a really interesting way to think of sales having the power to do the things that marketing has more typically done in the past, like sending out collateral and branded goodies and things like that.
Yeah, we didn't get there with our team internally, just because, again, when you're, if you're not in mid-market or enterprise markets, we're so micro. We were so, I'm no longer with the company, but they're still so micro, 1 to 10 employees. So that's hard when, the revenue isn't so large per opportunity. So it's harder in that area, but I could definitely see, eventually rolling it out to like our business development teams or our partner teams who are trying to generate those bigger deals.
Awesome. Anyone else like to share what you're running into with your ABM strategy?
Hi, Christina here. I work at Four Kites. We're a software company based out of Chicago. We also have Demandbase. We're not using a tool like Sendoso for direct mail, but I will look into that for gift cards, because our SDRs have been sending one-off gift card offers if they take a meeting, and we could definitely optimize that process, but not sure when the value will kick in there. So with our Demandbase instance, we have all of our account reps on the tool, and we actually focused heavily on training them to be able to use the tool and read the information in there, which they like it more straightforward. Demandbase, you kind of have to dig around. And then we're retraining our SDRs on it soon as well. With the intent data, they say they want it, but we need to figure out like the right program for them to run with it, just to make sure that they know what it actually means, how they define it. But with Demandbase, we're able to use intent data from G2 through an Excel import, one of our favorites. Bombora, there's like a free one, and then if you have Bombora subscription, you have more, and then Demandbase intent as well. But we're hoping to leverage the intent to also run our display ad campaigns through Demandbase. So that's what we're working with now.
That's great. And are you guys, do you know, so I guess the question is, the sales reps don't really know kind of what does intent mean? Okay, so they visited multiple website pages. At what point are they, qualified or really interested? Do you guys have that outlined yet?
We don't. I leaned heavily on what Demandbase and Bombora have as their free documentation to guide like how the rep should be using it. Right now we're just using the intent to highlight 5 accounts that our SDR team should reach out to based on competitive intent keywords, like if they're researching a competitor or if they're searching for competitor information. But that's the extent of our intent right now. So it's a journey.
Oh yeah, definitely. It'd almost be
I'm
nice if
curious
there's.
because,
Go ahead.
go on, Ash.
No, go ahead.
I'm curious, one of the things that we're struggling with Demandbase is the match rate. So we have particular profiles we want to go after. We get that information, we put it in Demandbase. And of course, I asked this during the sales process, like, we go after micro, small businesses. These are people working in their basement or their home office. Maybe they're a sole prop, a couple employees. And during the sales process, the salesperson, I gave them a sample set of data that I'd gotten from Experian because I really wanted to test this. They said, yep, no problem. We can find 85% of these companies, not a problem at all. So we bought and implemented Demandbase and put our first list in that we wanted to match with, and we came up with 6,500. So it was 65% match rate. And the Demandbase had said they acquired Engagio to help sort of better target the smaller business segment. And so I'm curious if, since the acquisition of Engagio, have you seen any improvement in audiences and match rates and things like that? We have not yet.
We have not yet either. And this might be due to some of our accounts being duplicates in our Salesforce instance, just due to the way that our industry works, and some domains being blank. So currently we're at a 72% match rate, not super high. So we actually rolled out lean data recently to help with that account match too. So.
Interesting. Okay.
What is
So
lean data?
we're considering.
Lean data is an account matching and routing. And it can do like very custom routing rules. So if there's an open opportunity with an account, then it can skip the SDR and go directly to the account rep. So we're leveraging that for our matching and routing more than the demand-based matching.
Got it.
With your display ads, when you were tracking all of that, did you use UTMs, or like how did you attribute that number of page views specifically towards display or Google Analytics, I guess?
Yeah, so when we
Yeah.
originally launched, we did have UTM parameters in there, but the way that they were set up, it almost like broke the parameter. So much so that you couldn't even see any of the analytics data coming from Demandbase and analytics. It was very strange. So we worked with their team, their tech team, figured out kind of what the issue was and was able to correct that.
Okay.
But otherwise, yeah, we lean really heavily on UTM parameters to figure out, what the display asset is and what's coming through. Within Demandbase too, I know they also have their own analytics in there that'll kind of report on activity per creative, but that was the extent.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you have other questions or use cases? And yes, that's my 4-year-old in the background, sorry. All right, well, if we have no more questions for today, I definitely want to thank you again, Carey and Ashley, so much for sharing your experience, walking through all of this. For everybody that's on, if you've got questions or you just want to bounce ideas or chat use cases, feel free to reach out either to myself or Andy or Carey and Ashley directly. I'm happy to help facilitate any of those conversations, just to get some brains together and try to hack through some of these challenges, and make sure that you've got everything in your power resource wise to set you up for success in automating ABM. Carey, Ashley, thank you so much again, and everyone else, we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye, folks.